Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure today to make public the report on travel and hospitality expenditures I recently issued to the Legislative Assembly. I have with me today Martin Rubin, the audit principal responsible for performance audits. I would like to start by making some opening comments, which will be followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions about the report. As the Auditor General of the Cayman Islands, my duty is to hold government to account and encourage more effective management of public resources. With this report, I believe you will find that I have met both of these responsibilities. In auditing the books and accounts of the Cayman Islands government for the last 4 years, I have reported many times that I was not provided with enough information to carry out my work. As a result, I had to issue what is known as a disclaimer of opinion on more occasions than I would have liked. Because of the poor record keeping and information available, I have not always been able to complete the financial audits of a number of organizations in a reasonable way and report how public money was being spent. As a result, I decided to audit certain kinds of expenditures that I believed were at greater risk of being mishandled. It was for this reason I selected travel and hospitality expenditures as a focus for this audit. In the near future, you will be hearing about other types of expenditure that I'm currently in the process of examining. My audit only covered travel and hospitality expenditures by core government officials. I did not look at spending in the statutory authorities and government companies at this time. We looked at expenditures from July 2009 through to December 2012. Based on the government's own records, travel and hospitality expenditures accounted for approximately $8.6 million between 1 July 2009 and 30th June 2012. While there is a small proportion to the overall amount spent by government, it is still a very large amount of money spent by government and an amount that is subject to a lot of discretion by public servants. Before moving on to my main findings, you should be aware that I was not able to complete all the work I wanted to because of incomplete record keeping and poor documentation. As I have been reporting in my financial audits for the past 4 years, and my predecessor before that, my auditors are not always given or able to obtain the information they need to perform their audit work. There is no excuse for this, and I have expressed my concerns once again in the report you now have in front of you. For example, out of over 80 sample items or individual expenditures my auditors selected for review, almost half of them lacked the necessary support to determine what was being paid. In several cases, for example, simple things like hotel receipts and airline tickets were missing. And in about 10% of the expenditures we reviewed, there was absolutely nothing to support the expenditures incurred. Other than not being able to complete the audit because of a lack of documentation, my audit team documented some serious problems with how government spends public funds for travel and hospitality. I expected to find great care taken with public money spent on travel and hospitality. I believe that the public expects no less. Instead of ensuring public monies were spent with due care, here are some of the things my auditors found. We found that financial officers were writing checks for travel expenses, sometimes with no supporting documentation and understanding whether the travel occurred or not. In one department, for example, travel advances were provided to one employee in the amount of $32,000. And this was written off partly because the financial officer did not know if the employee had even traveled and apparently could not provide the supporting documentation. In that ministry, a total of $167,000 of advances given to employees was written off because, again, employees could not provide the evidence for their expenditures. My auditors found that approximately $458,000 in travel and hospitality expenditures charged on credit cards and paid by finance officers where they did not get sufficient receipts to tell what the money was being spent on. In one case, we found a former minister was provided a credit card to pay for travel and hospitality expenses for convenience and in accordance with a policy issued by government officials. However, my auditors found that the minister incurred the expenditures and then approved the payment. The chief financial officer paid the bill even though there was no evidence that the expenses incurred were for government business. In other cases, we found politicians and officials getting advances for meals, etc., while on travel, and then getting the same expenses reimbursed a second time through charges on their credit cards. the basic financial controls my auditors expect to find were absent. Over the last 5 to 6 years, the government has had to manage with scarce resources and have had to make some very significant cuts in expenditure to balance the budget or limit their deficits. While this was happening, our audit found that the monitoring and controls for travel and hospitality expenditures were weak and budget overruns occurred. No one in government was effectively minding the store when it came to spending on this very discretionary area of expenditure. Of even greater concern, because of inconsistent recording in the accounts for travel spending, my auditors found that government officials don't really know how much it is spending for public servants to travel. It only takes someone to look at the government's website to know that there is very little information about public sector spending on government travel and hospitality. We have recommended that government needs to do a better job of proactively disclosing the details around official travel. With the control environment in a poor state, we believe that this proactive disclosure may also have the effect of ensuring greater care when it comes to incurring the expenditures in the first place. I welcome the lead taken by the Premier and the Deputy Governor in the last year of disclosing their travel costs, but would encourage the government to implement this in a systematic and consistent manner for all senior managers across the public service. In addition, we found that when FOI requests are made of government departments, the information being provided is not always correct. When we asked about procedures in place to ensure that the public is getting accurate information when they request it under the FOI law, we found that there was a clear lack of controls in place. The report includes a number of examples where it is clear that government did not get value for money for travel and hospitality. While much of the cause for this was a lack of government policy, we also found a lack of due diligence and reasonable efforts to ensure that rules that existed at the time were being followed. In conclusion, I am pleased to say that we have had good discussions with the Deputy Governor and his team, and that he provided a response to the recommendations. I welcome the introduction by the government during the course of our audit of a formal travel policy, which addresses a number of the issues we have reported on, and its future extension to areas including hospitality. However, more needs to be done to ensure that officials have a clear way forward to addressing the underlying problems around behaviours, controls and processes, which have led to the serious findings in this report. While it is important to have a robust and comprehensive policy, ensuring that it is effectively implemented and getting assurance that it is being complied with is equally, if not more important. And I could cite a number of examples where laws, policies and regulations have been put in place but without the intended outcomes due to poor implementation and non-compliance. The issues we have reported on with respect to the management of travel and hospitality expenditures are indicative of the broader issues that we have found in the audits of financial statements around the effective control, management and monitoring of the use of government resources. I hope that this report and its examples of waste and abuse will provide further impetus for the management of public resources with greater diligence and in line with the public's expectations. When my auditors can't obtain basic information to support how public money is being spent, I believe it is time for the public to sit up and take notice. It is time to change how we do things. Thank you for your attention, and I will now take questions about the report.
Just a couple questions, guys. Of the examples you gave, I believe one was the $32,000 written off for one senior official, another of a ministry writing off $167,000. Are you willing to name the ministries?
I don't want to get into the specifics. I think you can tell from looking at the areas that we examined in the report, the main places that we examined and the ministries we actually concentrated our work on, and they flow from those.
Okay. And is there a trend in terms of lack of information you're getting from these ministries? Is there a trend when compared to previous reports that you've tabled? Because you have mentioned this before, you've had a hard time from specific ministries getting information out of them. Yeah,
I think we have seen some commonality between the ministries we've struggled with before and in terms of this report as well.
Okay. And just one last one. I know, and again, I know it's tough for you guys to give specifics, but in the conclusion you wrote that it was hard to quantify how much government mishandled or was wasted. Mm-hmm. You mentioned over the review period $8.6 million. Is there maybe a ballpark figure?
Really, we can't do that. We haven't. We can't estimate that. You know, there are further issues about the certainty over that exact figure as well, in terms of how much was actually spent. Because we found, potential monies coded and recorded under different codes within the financial system, which could be travel and hospitality as well. So the reality is we can't give you a ballpark figure.
Okay. Danny? Fred?
Gentlemen, was there anything from this report that you found that's been reported to the police, and if so, what was it?
We haven't reported anything specifically from this report to the police at this stage.
Why not?
We're just going to get there, Brent. Initially, we would expect the ministries to take action in terms of the findings that we've identified. It's not. Our job is to report on the findings, and it's up to others to take specific action in terms of these reports. I'm sure that other institutions may be interested in the findings, and I'm certain that the Anti-Corruption Commission, for example, will be looking at this report in detail and maybe requesting further information in due course.
Okay, but they haven't.
Not yet, no.
Okay, but the other issue with that is these two ministries that you focused on don't really exist anymore. They've been changed with the new government coming in. Not just the people, but like the Ministry of Finance, Tourism, and Development really doesn't exist anymore. It's been reorganized into something else.
But the reality is it was operating as three distinct entities anyway in the first place.
But I'm sorry, Alistair, why can't you guys just go to the police and say, this is what we found? Why can't you do that?
We discuss issues with the Anti-Corruption Commission and the police all the time. I'm not going to get into specifics.
So you have discussed this with the Anti-Corruption Commission?
The Anti-Corruption Commission are aware that this report is coming out and that there's issues there. Further than that, not at this stage.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's up to the ACC is aware, and they'll discuss what to do with.
When they look at the details, they'll work it out for themselves.
Just a couple more things, if you bear with me, gents. This thing about I'm on page 14, number 53. We found travel and hospitality expenditures posted in accounts not included in the 8.6 million. And then it lists training, investigations, post-mortems, maintenance, special conferences. These are, I guess, traveling to just various conferences. Is that a good way to?
If I could provide you with a definitive answer, I'd give you one. It's uncertain.
Okay.
We looked at a number of areas. We did a scan across the government's financial reporting and accounting to identify potential areas that had been miscoded, and we found a potential range of items that potentially travel and hospitality, which hadn't been included under the travel and hospitality coding. So, in addition to the 8.6 million, there's potentially another 200,000 up to maybe 1.7 million, which could be classified, but we can't be certain.
Just because of the poor quality of the records.
Poor quality of the information and recording.
On page 15, number 59, number 60, this has to do with the ground transportation services. When you make reference to the entire amount of an additional $272,000, is that the amount that was left off in the initial response to the FOI request?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so they reported 100,000 of it, but left off the other 272 when they responded.
Can you give me the detail?
The additional 272,000 was not reported as part of the initial response.
Okay, and is this one of these cases where the government didn't respond properly to an FOI request? I'm not sure how to phrase that. I mean, in the FOI law, there's certain things that the government must do when they're looking up responses to these requests. Sometimes if they willfully ignore the records, it can be a crime.
Right.
I don't know how you all view that. Was this just?
I think it's just poor record. I don't think it was willfully. It was just poor record keeping. Again, that these were classified not as strictly as travel expenditures, and therefore maybe the officials involved didn't pick it up as part of their response. We can't make assumptions as to what the reasons are. It's what we found. That's
okay. Okay. So okay. You don't think there was anything nefarious going on there, at least not that you know of. Okay. Sorry, just one more thing. Maybe a few more things, but I won't do it all at once. The chart on page 21, expenditure description. this individual who stayed in a Cayman Brac hotel accommodations, there were approximately $33,000, give or take, that was spent over the 3 budget years. I'm just roughly estimating, but 150 a night for a hotel in the Brac, maybe 200. So the guy stayed in a hotel there for 250 days out of 3 years.
Well, that's why we highlight these as unusual expenditures.
Okay, but was there any explanation given for what the individual was doing there for that amount of time, and why they stayed in a hotel room, and why government didn't get an apartment or something like this?
For the most part, when we looked at expenditures, the reasons for those expenditures weren't necessarily provided. We just got basically this is what was paid for. In this particular case, I believe, and if I can get back to you, Brent, on it, but I'm pretty sure on this particular case, as with many that we looked at, the explanation for the actual expenditures was not there on file, so we couldn't determine that. But the exact nature of those expenditures, we could get back to you as to how much per night, for example, if you want to get down to that much detail. But I think that the point is that these expenditures were made in the first place.
I think there's a general theme here about what the expenditures were for and the purpose for them, and I think that's what one of the biggest challenges in terms of information is about, actually quantifying, clarifying, and finding out what they are actually incurred for and what the purpose was.
Have you reached out to those who are charged with those ministries, the 2 that you've pointed to in particular, whether it be the ministers responsible? I believe it would have been, at the time, Premier McKeever Bush and Minister Juliana O'Connor-Connolly, or even the chief officers. Have you gotten a response from them about these expenditures?
We haven't specifically spoken to the potential former ministers. We have discussed the issues with the chief officers and the like around the issues that arise from this, but that's as far as we've gone.
And you can't say that what the response has been from them in regards to where this money has gone or what it was used for?
Any explanations that we received during the course of the audit are taken into consideration in this report. So whatever information we did get from them to explain the nature of the expenditures or the purpose of them in terms of what we've included in the report are in the report.
So the ones in which you did not get information, it's not in the report, obviously.
Well, there's a number of examples where we can't actually identify what the transactions were for. So trying to get information about something you can't actually find out basic information about is challenging. And we weren't doing a forensic audit here. We were trying to do a value for money audit, a performance audit. I think that's an important detail. If we were trying to take this into a forensic perspective, we would have dug a lot further and a lot more detail to try and get to the bottom of everything. But we were looking at across the piece more broadly about how government manages travel and hospitality rather than trying to follow through to the nth detail of individual cases.
As you presented this audit, I couldn't help but notice that this is one of the few times in which you've used stronger language than normal. Is it safe to say that you were appalled by your findings here?
I would say I wasn't surprised by my findings. The findings here are, I suppose, are indicative of broader issues that we find with the financial statements and the work that we found in terms of getting information about that. But saying that I'm not surprised doesn't mean I'm not significantly concerned by the findings that I have here, and that they are of import. And I think more importantly, they're more indicative of issues more broadly which need to be addressed around financial management in government.
Should people sit up and take notice of what you've put here?
I think we've said so, yes.
Just a couple more from me. In the hospitality section of the report, it talks about money that was spent for Christmas parties, and I've added it up, and it sounds like something like $12,500 was spent on alcohol at those parties. The deputy governor, in his response to this, doesn't seem to say that that's improper, but that he's limited, or the portfolio of the civil service has limited expenditures on these Christmas parties to $25 per employee. Does the Auditor General's office have a view on whether taxpayer funds should be spent on buying alcohol for Christmas parties for government employees?
Well, I don't believe the government's policy of $25 a day,
Per employer.
per person is about buying alcohol. I think it's about providing lunches or whatever and dinners rather than the alcohol per se. The specific issue around policy around alcohol is for government to determine in totality. I think the personal regulations talked about it only for functions, specific functions potentially. But the reality is they need to have a hospitality policy in place which talks about how alcohol is treated and when and if it is appropriate.
Okay, but you don't. Do you have any specific advice for them on that, or?
In reality, it's up to them. But our problem. We could look at the policy in my office, which is about we don't provide alcohol unless it's purchased by me personally or the management team. But
the last thing is a question I have is on this Qatar. Well, two things. One on the Qatar trip on page 19. You guys have laid out what was spent there. Is there some reason the one individual named in this needed to be there for 22 days?
Again, we didn't follow through in the detail of why they were there for 22 days. We just reported the information we obtained regarding this. That would be for a further forensic examination if that was required.
Okay. And then on kind of the same question, the table right below it on the Panama trip, there's a list of delegates that went there. 14 of them were entertainers. Do you know what entertainers are in that context?
I think that was pretty widely reported in the media at the time. Regarding that was Swanky Kitchen.
The bands?
Band.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions from the folks here? No?
Okay. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming today.